Welcome to Ithaca Politics, a series of shows that looks at the political life of Ithaca, New York. Our guests in this episode are the candidates for the First Ward, incumbent Cynthia Brock and the Democratic challenger Kayla Matos. Were you both surprised at the outcome of the June primary? If you'd like to start, Kayla?
I was, but I'm also thankful for the outcome. My team and I were able to gather over 100 volunteers. We were able to knock over 1,000 doors and really hit the community running. It was really nice. Once we finished the election, we ran some numbers, and we actually had about a 60% increase in turnout just for primaries alone. Which means that we're also doing our part in bringing political awareness to the community and really encouraging more folks to get out there and vote and actually feel like and believe that their voices are being heard and true representation is coming to council.
Cynthia, were you surprised as kind of a longtime member of council and representing the First Ward?
I don't know if I was surprised at the result as much as I was surprised at the level of outside resources and influence that came into what I consider to be a very down-ticket race. When I learned that the New York State Working Families Party was committing resources that volunteers came from as far away as New York City to come up to Ithaca to canvass, when I found out that people were being paid to canvass and go door to door, when you look at that impact that it has on a ward race, I don't think it was as much of a surprise. For me, having run, this is now my 5th campaign, I've always felt that it's important for the candidate to be the one doing the door-to-door, sitting on people's doorsteps, listening to their issues, getting to know them, building a rapport, and also demonstrating to them what you stand for. That, for me, is an integral part of running for office. It helps you become a better legislator and a better representative. And I have always done that myself. So I was clearly outmatched and out-resourced, and in that way, the result was not a surprise.
Well, Kayla, do you have a response to the approach that you took to campaigning?
Yeah. I would have loved if we would have got downstate volunteers to come and door knock. I would have loved that. However, yes, the Working Families Party did declare me a priority race, and they did provide us with one staffer who helped us with the campaign, developing our strategic plan, developing our GOTV plan, and just ensuring that we were knocking the amount of doors that we said that we were knocking. Every canvas that was for me and the Ward 1, as long as my schedule permitted, I did attend, and I was knocking doors. In West Village alone on election day, I made sure to go to every resident, see what their voting plans were, how they were getting over to the polls, which was really nice. I've made sure to do the work for my residents or the residents within my ward. And I always love to communicate too that even if you don't see me at your door, you're always more than welcome to come to Southside Community Center and stop by. I'm there Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And there actually has been residents or constituents who have taken me up on that offer, and some who even say that they will be coming down. So I love that I can also provide an open door policy to the constituents in this ward.
Well, let's talk about the First Ward for just a minute. It's really a set of diverse neighborhoods. We have the South Side, we have the North Side, we have the West Hill. Can you kind of describe what the particular issues are for each neighborhood?
Well, I think I will start. I think North Side is looking, obviously, flooding is going to be a big issue in terms of what the kind of increased costs that North Side residents are going to face with insurance premiums that'll be resulting from the adoption of the new FEMA flood maps. So affordability having to do with those costs as well as the issue of flooding. Southside Community Center definitely, or South Side neighborhood, it's definitely the primary concern is affordability. Individuals' property taxes are an increasing concern. It's hard for residents to carry that growing load. We also have the south of the creek neighborhood. Their interest as much is flooding as well as affordability, as well as safety. Spencer Road, which I consider to be the most affordable neighborhood in Ithaca, flooding is a big part of their concerns, as well as public safety. We've had many incidents over the last several years having to do with guns being found, shots being fired, as well as homelessness in Spencer Road. Traffic is a major concern on Spencer Road. The Nate's Floral Estates neighborhood, homelessness and public safety is a big issue. It is something that they deal with every single day in terms of individuals coming onto properties, breaking into homes, sleeping on their porches, as well as physical assaults. In terms of the West End and West Hill, traffic, pedestrian access, bicycle access, affordability, stormwater also are major concerns.
So I would agree with both the south side and north side, flooding being a huge concern. Me being a resident on Spencer Road, I've personally dealt with the difficulties of flooding and having to get new rugs in the basement, unfortunately. And I would love to work with the city to figure out affordability and how to offset these costs, because let's be honest, the flood insurance is more than likely going to be a thing for our residents to have to worry about. Property taxes is another huge thing that I'm hearing from residents, and I definitely understand that. When it comes to the West Hill, access to transportation is a huge problem, especially with the lack of resources that TCAT is currently receiving. Cutting essential routes like the West Hill is becoming problematic. I have personal co-workers as well as friends who live in that area, so I understand their struggles. And I agree with the encampments with being a problem within Nate's Florals, and that's why I'm really happy that we're gonna, hopefully adopt the revised encampment policy to really start helping with providing resources to the encampment, but then also pushing for a housing first initiative so that we can also start not displacing these residents, but putting them in homes like they rightfully deserve.
So you both listed a host of issues. If a constituent asked you, well, what is your priority?
That one's always hard to decide between. Being a born and raised Ithacan and a tenant my whole life, affordability is always my first priority. Creating more affordable housing, but also figuring out how our housing markets can be more affordable to our residents. And when I'm saying housing markets, I don't just mean for our renters. I also mean for our young people who want to be homeowners like myself, struggling to get your first home. Being at the Southside Community Center, I've literally watched the homes in that community go upwards towards the $300,000 range and just becoming completely unaffordable. And I see how such institutions like Alternatives are trying to provide programs to help with, home grant, or like to provide grants to be able to give down payments. However, that's still not doing enough. So working with our city government and also state government to figure out how we can create more public housing, of course, and then also providing just our community with the resources that they need. I do feel like we struggle with a lot of mental health here in the community, and I do think that I understand that, it's the county's responsibility, but also those residents are within the city, so I do think that the city needs to make it their responsibility to also provide resources and help support these organizations that are already doing the work, such as REACH, such as OAR.
Well, I think my main priorities have to do with how do we make a resilient community in the face of the impacts of climate change? How do we ensure that our city services are fully staffed and fully resourced in order to provide the services needed? When we are looking at the impacts of climate change, this also speaks to the impacts of the new FEMA flood maps, the costs that will be incurred upon residents because of those implications. What can we do as a city in terms of mitigating that, either through adopting new zoning codes and regulations and building standards, and how can we adapt to the future and looking at future planning, and what is the most appropriate thing to thinking about the city for the next 50 and 100 years. We have been seeing throughout the region, and I think people are very concerned about flooding, drought, fire, emergencies. We need to make sure that our roads, our water and sewer infrastructure, our fire delivery service, our police services are adequately staffed and appropriately administered. We expect the highest standards among all of our city departments, but we need to make sure that they have the support that they need to provide the services that we all rely on in terms of keeping our community safe and looking towards the future. So those are the priorities that I will continue to focus on in terms of city government. We as a city don't actually build housing, but we work with the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency to administer state and federal funds to help build affordable housing. We look at zoning to make sure that we're putting housing in more dense locations that are close to resources and amenities that people need to reduce their reliance on TCAT or their personal car. Obviously, that helps build a vibrant community.
Kayla, you mentioned the resolution regarding the encampment in the jungle. And it appears that the latest resolution is to remove the language of enforcement. And I'd kind of like to run a scenario by the both of you and how you might react to this. So we have a man that has been sleeping in the Seneca Street bus shelter for 2 or 3 nights, and he's not harming anybody, but people have complained to the police. So the outreach workers approach this person and say, you know, we'd like to see if you can go into the jungle. That's kind of sort of a sanctioned encampment. You know, you'll have some of the amenities there. But the person said, no, I'm not going. I've had a bad experience there. Likewise, he's not allowed in the emergency shelter system. So how should this person be treated? One, by the police, and by kind of the social fabric of Ithaca.
So I think that's the problem, is the fact that we would be recommending the encampments. The encampment should not be the solution to homelessness. We need to approach this with housing first, and we have to, as council, create housing to house the unhoused. However, I do understand that the uncomfortabilities of being in the shelters, but also the uncomfortabilities potentially being in the encampments. And all you can, and I don't know if this is just me speaking, putting on like my outreach worker, hat on, but all you can really do is be an aid to that person and really just try to advocate for them and be the person to hold their hand step by step. Whether that be encouraging them and figuring out how we can get you into, maybe it's not the shelter on State Street, but it's one of the hotel rooms that they provide in placement of, or figuring out what your community or your village looks like, and if there's anybody within the family or close circle that can take you in and house you for a little bit. I don't believe that that's when we criminalize and write tickets. I actually had a conversation with an officer recently regarding ticketing those who are, who are sleeping in in the red zone, or and they even agreed that sometimes the process could get a little pointless and redundant. You're giving somebody a ticket to appear in court who's not appearing in court, so now they get a bench warrant, and now the next time they have an interaction with the police, they're getting locked up to then just be released because of bail reforms to then continue to do the same thing. So at this point, we're wasting city dollars, we're wasting the police department's dollars. So our current plan isn't working, so we have to get creative on a new plan.
In the immediate moment, you would allow this person to exercise their free choice to sleep where they would like to sleep, but optimally provide support services for
Yes.
that person.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think what you have done is highlight the gap that is existing in the current policy. The current policy creates a green zone where camping would be allowed. And the current policy encourages in administration of this and engaging with people who are living unhoused, who are choosing not to relocate to the shelter, and they don't want to go to the green zone. The gap that we need to address is we need to make sure that the spaces where camping is allowed have proper management and oversight so that everybody who is there, who chooses to go there, will feel safe and supported and be able to reside there and have all of their needs met in terms of access to not only bathrooms and showers and trash disposal, but make sure they have access to peer support, outreach workers, and so on. Under our current system, and frankly, I don't know of any police officer that has issued any type of ticket or citation to someone who is homeless. That's not something that we do. And so to put forward that scenario, I don't think is fair or adequate because it's not something that we practice at all. We also don't have access to hotels unless we are in code blue, which is during the winter months when the temperature drops to 32 degrees or below. So in terms of this scenario, we definitely want the outreach worker or the person that is supporting them to encourage them to relocate to a place where they are allowed to be, where they will have the supports that they need, but to make it very clear that they're continuing to stay in a unpermitted area is not acceptable. We need to make sure that people have access to sanitation. We need to make sure that people are safe at night. So by creating a zone that will allow camping that has support, we can create those spaces for people to be.
Okay, but if it's not acceptable for this individual to be sleeping in the bus shelter and he refuses other options, what is the choice there?
I know that in cases where we and outreach workers have worked to relocate individuals who are very reluctant to go after 5, 6, 7 interactions, in my understanding, police have been called to be present along with outreach workers to encourage them to relocate. In my understanding, we have not had situations where people continue to not relocate voluntarily that has resulted in ticketing or anything like that. I think it's about building rapport, building trust. Our police officers are fantastic. They have a lot of experience in working with people who are living unsheltered, and I believe that we can support that individual to a place that is more appropriate for them to be.
The preliminary agreement now between the city of Ithaca and Cornell, the pilot, is for $4 million. And I'd like to hear from you both. Cynthia, would you be voting to approve this resolution? And if you were on council, would you support it? That's the first part of the question, but the second part of the question is the criticism that has come because people feel the negotiations should wait for a incoming city council and a new incoming mayor in 2024. So how do you respond to that criticism as well? Kayla, would you like to go ahead?
I'll start with the criticism part. I definitely understand councils want to get a negotiation solidified. At the end of the day, we're approaching budget season and we have to plan, for the next year of Ithaca's budget and what policies or what we will be supporting, so on and so forth. So I'm not upset, and I don't disagree with current council wanting to seal a deal. However, I do not agree with the $4 million nor the 21 year term. that Cornell is currently offering. I do believe that we deserve more than the $4 million. And my biggest push is that we need shorter term contracts. We need to be able to visit our relationship, or as I said yesterday in my speech, our partnership with Cornell quite more frequently. Inflation is a real thing. We have to base, we have to base it essentially on the economic well-being of Ithaca. And I understand that it's not Cornell's responsibility to support Ithaca. However, we are the home of Cornell University. Their professionals, their students utilize our services. They are integrated within our community. We hope that they get integrated into our community. And they are Ithacans for at least 4 years. So I do believe that Cornell should do their fair share in paying their part and helping support and upkeep the city that we all live in.
So if this came to a council vote, you're sitting on council, you would
Yeah, I
not
would vote.
agree to the $4 million?
We are a company town. Cornell has a tremendous role in our community and a commitment to our residents and working with us in partnership to make sure that Ithaca is as vibrant as it can be. I agree that this process has been behind closed doors up to this point. I don't think it's appropriate to rush into a decision. We need to give our public and our community a chance to fully understand the terms and come to a point perhaps of supporting it. Whether or not it means that our community members continue to reach out to council, continues to reach out to Cornell and ask for extended negotiations, I think that's entirely reasonable. I think rushing to a vote at this point is inappropriate. Yes, it will have an impact on the budget if we go forward without a commitment from Cornell. I do believe and take them at their word that they are partners with the city and I do believe in good faith that even if we go into this budget season without an agreement in hand, that Cornell will continue to work with us to come up with a satisfactory solution. I will not vote in support of this agreement on tomorrow because basically, the 20-year term is too long. 20 years allows Cornell to sort of walk away and not be engaged in an ongoing conversation with the city about how we can work together to support our residents. I'm looking for a 5 to 7 year term. I don't believe tying it to an index of inflation is reasonable. We are a labor-focused organization. Our healthcare costs, our pension costs grow far in exceedance of inflation. That contribution will decline in purchasing power from year one if we don't tie it to inflation plus 2%, something like that. And then, of course, when we think about $4 million, I also don't believe that that is an adequate contribution, especially when you consider that Cornell does not make any contribution or significant contribution to the school district or to the county. And as we are here and we're talking about homelessness services, we're talking about programming, you've mentioned different organizations that help our community. When our schools and our county is not adequately funded by Cornell, we as a city end up picking up the slack and providing those services and expanding our departments to meet the needs that are not being met financially by Cornell. So, especially since they are not contributing to the county or the school district, and we are faced with that obligation, $4 million doesn't come close to meeting those needs.
We have time for maybe one more question. If you have a question for each other that you would like to address, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Kayla, in our last forum, you did articulate that you are committed to defunding police. Can you further elaborate on how you would do that?
So defunding the police, I don't mean in essence get rid of our whole police department, because I do believe that, the police department does provide safety to our community. However, I would love to look at the budget and see how we can adjust and allocate some costs, even if it might be reducing the number of vehicles purchased. Also seeing if there's ways that, we don't have to purchase militarized weapons, or if there's a way that we can cut costs by maybe not purchasing metal bullets, but what is the price compared to like a rubber bullet? That is more so what I meant by defunding the police department. So yeah.
Okay. Kayla, do you have a question for Cynthia?
Yep. How, if you continue on council, how would you better serve the constituents in West Village and Chestnut?
Well, when I first started on council 12 years ago, I was very engaged with West Village and Chestnut. Officer Augustine was shot that year, and there was a murder in Chestnut Apartments. That was literally within the first few months of being on council. And I tried to be very proactive in being engaged and putting forward recommendations and solutions and my idea of what the community needed and how we could support it. What I came to realize over time was that any types of improvements or changes really needed to come from within. It needed to be suggestions that residents themselves wanted to see enacted. And so making myself available and accessible to residents so that they would feel free to reach out and connect with me in ways that I could support them has been something that I've tried to do. One of the challenges is that a lot of the issues that I hear oftentimes have to do with management and how those properties are managed by the property owner. And when you are dealing with that, you have very limited legal resources to try to improve the quality of management from apartment complexes. So I continue to have regular conversations with the owner of, or at least the manager of West Village Apartments, the owner of Chestnut Hill Apartments, and so it's about keeping that dialogue open. And so being able to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm hearing issues that you're having with this tenant who is harassing or intimidating a neighbor. What are you doing to address this? How are you dealing with maintaining common spaces? How are you, I think you need to do more in terms of adequately maintaining the property. How are you addressing security? It's really about engaging with the property manager and owner so that they can do their best job vis-a-vis the tenants.